Food prices are expected to rise and drama between Trump and Trudeau unfold. I'm Marco Perri. Welcome to the Perri platform. We've got two stories today, and I think I'm going to save the Trump versus Trudeau fiasco for the end. To begin, the Globe and Mail cites that food prices are predicted to rise by 4% next year. So, if you spend $100 every week on groceries, expect that to be $104 next year. It might sound minor, but over the course of the entire year, that could add up to be about $200 in extra expenses. Now, if you spend maybe $200 every week on grocery, something more applicable to a medium-sized family, you'll be looking at about spending $208 now, which adds up to about $400 in extra expenses throughout the year. Keep in mind too that the average rate of food inflation is around 2%, so doubling that in a given year, it's pretty concerning, especially if we think that that trend is going to persist going into the future. Extra expenses are definitely not going to be welcomed by Canadian households. We already pay tremendously for things like housing, things like cellular, gas, and now food. To just feed ourselves and keep ourselves alive is going to make a major dent in our pocket. So, what's really driving these increased costs of living? In particular, the food increases. One issue that is cited in the article is climate change, and the other is trade issues, and these two are probably the top contributors. Aside from those two, you also have things like outbreaks, which are affecting the supply and demand for certain types of good. One issue is the increase in global demand for meat, combined with a reduction in supply. Places that were typically lower in terms of GDP have started to rise. As a result, their diets are shifting, and things like meat, which were once seen as extravagancies, are now becoming staples, so people want more of that. But combine that with the fact that things like the African swine fever are reducing stock, and it creates an issue. You have a less amount of resources to share among a growing demand. The price will raise as a result of that. Now, on one hand, you can say that we have some alternatives, like plant-based patties, but those are expensive. I don't think there's much cost savings to be had when shifting over like that. And we're talking about rapid inflation right now, so increasing your costs further is probably not highly desirable. Then, there's also outbreaks in California in terms of lettuce being linked with E. coli. So, as you can see here, the same issue would play out with supply and demand implications. You're reducing your supply of lettuce, people want that, you're going to have to bid more to actually get it. When you multiply issues like that across a range of foods, it can add up. And you also have economic implications, which include our murky trade situations happening all over the world right now. It wasn't too long ago that China tried to cripple our canola industry, our pork exports, and a bunch of other things because of what we did to their Huawei CFO. And China is also battling with the United States right now, and they have a full-on trade war going on. People are worried that we may get dragged into that, even not as a direct contributor, but as someone who feels the backlash. In terms of food, we do import some fruits and vegetables from China, and losing access to that, or being granted access but at a premium, would not be too good for us and our country. It might force us to look for other suppliers, which would probably come with a higher cost. China is relatively cheap when it comes to the export side of things. It's also interesting to note that another key source of our produce imports, Mexico, is facing a lot of problems right now. It's taking them forever to cross across the American border, which is going to complicate their journey because then they have to go through America and finally reach us. If it's taking an increased amount of time for them to even get past that first phase, well, it's going to complicate our shipping times as well and add cost to that. One of the reasons why this is happening is because the USMCA still has not been finalized, and that is the replacement of NAFTA. This is the US, Mexico, Canada, USMCA trade agreement. There's been so many complications and stallings and delays with it that it's just been halted right now. People are still debating about what parts to add, what to subtract, and we just need to get it done. Pass that bill, and let's make trade easier between our nations. The US is partially to blame for this delay because right now they're going through the impeachment inquiry, and the House has put that at the forefront of their initiatives. The USMCA is being delayed as people are still trying to figure out what's going on with the votings for this impeachment hearing. The longer that drags on for, the worse it will look for Canada. Not having that agreement in place puts us in a vulnerable position when it comes to importing produce, and that's one of the key factors here that is driving pessimism for the upcoming cost of food. Now, to add further uncertainty here, Canada's food price report, the people who come up with this inflation prediction say this: our estimates are typically 80% accurate, but when it's wrong, it's because we lowballed it. In other words, it's likely it will be at least a 4% inflation, and if that's wrong, it's quite likely to be higher than that. Not very comforting, and given the world landscape, I wouldn't be too surprised if that actually came to fruition. So how does Canada minimize damage here? I think really the first thing we have to do is figure out the USMCA. That is pivotal in ensuring that we have access to cheap produce for our country. Now, the issue with China is a little bit more complex, so given the fact that they are one of our largest trading partners, there does seem to be some incentive to figuring things out with them, but you must also account for things like ethics here. China is a monstrous power, and they have been caught up in humanitarian scandal after scandal, and they treated Canada very poorly. I still will not forget the actions that they took upon us because of our extradition of the Huawei CFO. They try to rain down fury and try to bully us. We cannot permit such actions. So there is a case to be made that we forsake China, and we do that at our own detriment though. The bottom line is that our economy and America's economy do not grow stronger by fighting a pseudo trade war with the Chinese. The fact of the matter is though that it hurts China to not have these partners to trade with. So what we're doing is we're hurting ourselves and we're hurting China in hopes of curbing them because their behavior is unacceptable and economically is the best way to get your point across in today's world. Fighting a physical war is highly undesirable due to everyone's mutually assured destruction. So I hear that argument, and I do think there's a case to be made for Canada trying to cut off ties with China as much as possible. Even if it hurts us, even if it leads to further inflation, well, it might just be the bullet that we have to bite to fight for justice in today's world. The other issue that was cited that is leading to an increase in costs are the outbreaks, the swine fever and the E. coli. Now, things like that happen all the time. It is nothing new. They're part of just the cycle of food production. Every once in a while, something like that will pop up and will increase costs and it will shut down supply. Maybe if we want to tackle that, we have to increase regulation, make sure that farmers are following safety protocol, but that's nothing new. We've dealt with that for dozens of years already at this point. Now, let's transition to our next story. Canada is involved in a little bit of NATO drama. So NATO is essentially a treaty between some of the world's top powers. The official name is the North Atlantic Trade Organization, and every once in a while, they will meet up at a summit. So there's been a video that's been leaked, and Trudeau is speaking with the French president, the British PM, and two other figures. The French president is Macron, and the British PM is Boris Johnson, respectively. So those are two pretty high-profile people. This entire thing is overblown, though, and the media is hyping it up. I'm not too sure why. So I would show you the video and the audio clip, but the audio is very poorly recorded. It's not like they were actually at a stand giving a professional speech. It was just a casual conversation amongst these guys as they're drinking a drink. They're chatting it up, and somehow a stray microphone picked up the audio. So they're chatting, and they get to the topic of Trump, but he's never actually named, but it's very clear they're talking about him, and I'll get to that in a second. So they're talking about why was he late today, and Trudeau makes a joke. He says because he takes a 40-minute press conference, and then he says like the staff were very bothered by that. It was a surprise and whatnot. And the reason why we know it's Trump is because Trump is the only leader who took a presser for that amount of length. So that's literally it. That is the entire thing that people are calling making a mockery of Trump. Trudeau is basically expressing his dismay at the fact that he had to wait a little bit because Trump took a press conference for 40 minutes before they were going to meet. That's it. And he's not saying this publicly either. He's telling it to these other world leaders in a closed circle, but a microphone picked it up. So that is literally it. Trudeau is making a joke that Trump was late because he took a presser. Maybe it's mockery. That's the word that the media is using on this, but I'm not too sure that it even fits the criteria. It's just Trudeau trying to tell a tale in kind of a funny way about why he was delayed. It's not that serious at all. So, okay. And also, take into account the context here. As I've laid out, Trudeau did not go on a microphone and start trashing Trump. He wasn't publicly trying to rant about it. He wasn't crying about it. He was literally in a group of his peers, a small circle, and he was telling them what happened. It's not that serious. It would happen to anybody. If you were at a conference and you were in his shoes, it's very likely that you would be telling your friend group, if something happened to you like that, why you were delayed and how you were unpleased by it. And Trudeau was smiling about it too. He wasn't pouting. He wasn't fuming. He's just a very normal, casual conversation. And maybe one of the reasons for the shock factor is because we're not used to seeing war leaders like that talk in that manner. But it's a very casual tone, and they are people. Keep that in mind. So here is Trump's response. Obviously, he caught word of this, and he wasn't too pleased, but I don't think he was that angry either. You can be the judge of that. Here we go.
Well, he's two-faced. And honestly, with Trudeau, he's a nice guy. I find him to be a very nice guy. But, you know, the truth is that I called him out on the fact that he's not paying 2%. And I guess he's not very happy about it. I mean, you were there, a couple of you were there, and he's not paying 2%, and he should be paying 2%. It's Canada, they have money, and they should be paying 2%.
So that's that. As you can see, Trump says that Trudeau is two-faced, but then he says that he's a nice guy. It doesn't seem to me like he's really too hung up on the issue. The media is hyping this up like it's the Conor McGregor versus Floyd Mayweather fight, but if you just listen to the clips, it's pretty clear that nobody really cares that much. This is child's play. And just so we're clear, the 2% that Trump is talking about near the end there is an agreement of NATO. Each party member is to spend 2% of their GDP on the military. It's a fact that Canada is not upholding this agreement, and America is putting pressure on us to ramp up our spending a little bit. It's also true that our armed forces use heavily outdated weaponry and whatnot, so there's actually a case to be made for further funding there, but that's another discussion. So Trudeau responded to this spat, basically saying that our relationship with these states is strong. He also admitted to making this reference to Trump's press conference, and he just plays it down, which is the right approach here. This is a complete non-issue. People are mad at Trudeau, thinking that he disrespected Trump. I think that's overblown. People are mad at Trump, thinking that he disrespected Trudeau. I think that's also overblown. I will say, I did see some funny comments about the two-faced remark. So when Trump said that, someone commented, oh, it's true. Trudeau does have two faces. One that's white and one that's brown. And that's in reference to those photos that came out prior to the election. So yeah, have a sense of humor. It's really not that serious at all. It's like people are anticipating these war leaders to act like children and to fight each other over such a petty comment. It's nothing. I think there's something interesting to think about here though, and that is, what other things do these politicians talk about when they're off the record? When they think they're in private? I'm sure we would all be shocked. Like, what are they talking about? Which country to try and invade? Making fun of other war leaders for weird things that we don't even know about? I'm sure that'd be really interesting to listen to, but luckily, this one clip appears to be a relatively mild occurrence and nothing that anyone should be losing their mind over. So that brings me to the end of today's conversation. If you enjoyed the content, be sure to leave a review and share. That'll help us grow. And you can also find me on Twitter and Instagram at Perri Platform. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you soon.